If we were to take a snapshot of each of the boys at around 6 to 9 months old, and then take another snapshot of each of them at 5 years old and compare, they each look very different than expected, and it's as if they flipped trajectories. Hi, everyone, and welcome to my channel where I plan to focus on our lives living in New York City with our two autistic boys, talk about some resources that we use, and probably some of our upcoming trips as well. I also want to say this at the beginning of the video that we are pretty new to social media, so for now we plan to just do faceless videos. I also want to make some videos about how things were at the early years for our family and when both of our boys were diagnosed. Just to note, both boys were diagnosed around their second birthdays. And one more thing before we get to the topic, and it's a pretty big disclaimer alert. I want to put this out there. I'm not in any way, shape, or form someone that diagnoses children with autism. This is my perspective, this is our family's perspective, parenting two children with autism and living our lives. So if you have any concerns, please discuss any concerns with your healthcare providers, with your pediatricians, with your children's teacher, and with anyone in your life that you feel can best guide you and can help you seek support and can also help you seek assessments and evaluations. Okay, so to get back to the specific topic of this video, I'm going to be discussing the differences and similarities that my boys had in terms of early signs of autism when they were much younger. So we're looking at year one of their lives. If we were to take a snapshot of each of the boys at around 6 to 9 months old, and then take another snapshot of each of them at 5 years old and compare, they each look very different than expected, and it's as if they flipped trajectories. My oldest son is a preteen now, and I always say that there were signs of autism starting in the early months of his life. One of the things that stood out was him staring at light fixtures, especially any lights on the ceilings, lamps, and television. And no, no one was parking him in front of a television, and no one was giving a baby tons of screen time, but he was heavily fixated on televisions, so much so that he would turn his head around in any way, shape, or form to try to see any of the lights or the TV. He would often arch his back when he was being carried to look at the lights up at the ceiling. I also want to note that this may be seen in other children and other babies. And any sign of autism that I discussed today on its own are not to be seen as a big red flag. It's really a combination of different signs. Some are more red flags than others. I understand that. So if you are looking at those type of things in children in your lives, again, discuss with professionals. But I always think that it's just a combination of all the different things that either of my children were or weren't doing that really led to their autism diagnosis. So the second thing that I noticed was that he wasn't very cuddly. He wasn't a very cuddly baby. He didn't smile much. He also wasn't fussy. He slept well. He ate well. He didn't cry. He didn't really express any needs. We anticipated a lot. The third thing that we noticed was little eye contact. The fourth was he wasn't attending to his name. So these are things a lot later in that first year of life that we were really looking for, and he wasn't doing. He wasn't pointing. He didn't seem interested in others. Um, he was and like I mentioned earlier, he just wasn't interested in letting us know his needs. So we were often just anticipating his needs, kind of following a schedule, didn't think much of it really. Another thing, he had some sensory issues. So he didn't like having his hair wet, he didn't like having his head tilted back when bathing. Um, he also didn't like swings. And now we know that these were sensory and vestibular issues that he was having at that early age. So by the time that he was 12 months old, so 1 years old, he was saying a couple of words, but he wasn't meeting those milestones, X amount of words that a 12-month-old should be expected to say. So we expressed some concerns to his pediatrician and we did the wait and see. So during the wait and see, around 13 months of age, he started walking and he started walking on his toes and he kept on walking on his toes. This was another sign that in isolation, we might not think anything of it. Some kids start toe walking when they're early walkers, but we're now looking at many other signs, and this was just another one that we added to the list of our concerns. He also was doing a lot more stimming, like hand flapping. He was doing this like galloping back and forth, which later on we realized was also a stim. Now, during this wait and see period, we realized that we were really anticipating all his needs. We thought, well, how would he know his name if we never say it? We never call him by his name. And we also thought, well, we give him everything that he needs. He never needs to talk. He never needs to say anything. He doesn't need to point. A little bit of denial, maybe. So by the time he was 12 months, like I said, to 18 months, we were like, okay, we're going to work on all these skills because we might be the reason why he's not developing them. We worked on calling him by his name. We put things out of reach so that he could hopefully be encouraged to point or ask for it. We did some hand over hand pointing and not just at things afar, but also at pictures and items. We worked on creating basically an environment that he would be more excited to just be more engaged with and with us. So, what was the conclusion? We saw very little progress. We actually saw a regression in the amount of words he was saying. By 18 months, when we went back to a checkup, he basically was not. He didn't have any words. Nothing much had changed, and what we were hoping to see change. Not to say that our efforts were the reason why um, that happened. Looking back, that was probably just how he was going to develop at that moment, at that time. That was maybe part of a regression that he was experiencing. So I have to admit that at this time I was in a very angry denial. Deep down, I knew what I was looking at. I had researched all the signs. I was familiar with autism through my job, but I was in a very angry denial. That's what I would call. Um, I was also very upset because I felt like we did the quote unquote all the right things to help him at home, and we saw no improvements, and that really sucked. I really felt tormented, and I just wanted to do it all. I wanted to research it all. I wanted to find something online that would say everything that you're doing is gonna make it better, and you're gonna see a change right away, and he's just gonna be fine. Let's also remember that these were the early 2010s. And I feel like the information back then was so dire. Anything related to autism felt very dire and very scary. And I just didn't want to accept that. And I want to say this, I'm glad I didn't accept all those scary prognosis back then because things have really changed. Um, so as I was trying to process the what ifs, I went ahead and I started the early intervention process here in the city. And I'll probably do another video when it comes to how they were diagnosed, both boys. So my oldest son was diagnosed with PDD NOS, and I believe it's because at that time they wouldn't diagnose children under the age of 2 with autism. Soon after, the DSM was changed, and when he was reassessed at age 4, he was given a autism diagnosis. So now I'm going to move on and discuss my younger son. He is almost 6 years old, and like I mentioned earlier, I had a lot of worries about having a second child a second child, period, and then the concerns of the second child having autism or not having autism. So, both, there's a big gap between the boys' age, um, and partly was because of some worries that we had. What if we have a typical child and our older son has higher needs? What would that look like for the younger child? Or what if we have another child with autism or any needs, and how would we manage that? So that will also probably be another video. So again, to discuss my second child now, he had a lot of very different signs and development compared to my first son. So when he was a baby, so that first year of life, he was developing pretty typically. He had great eye contact. He would seek attention from others. He was affectionate. He liked hugs. He never liked being in a room by himself. He would complain. He would whine if he was ever left alone in a room. He always would look at people when they were talking versus looking at any screens or any television or any lights. He laughed and he giggled. He didn't have any repetitive behaviors within that first year of life. He didn't toe walk. His gross motor and fine motor skills were developing just fine. And he made a lot of sounds. So he didn't have a lot of words. He didn't have any words by his first birthday, but he did make a lot of sounds. So right before his first birthday, about a month right before, it seemed like his light just dimmed, which I can now use the word regression. But it really looked like his personality, the light he had in him, just dimmed, and it dimmed in front of our eyes. This time around, seeing it, which was very different than my first child, but just then seeing what was happening, I wasn't in denial, but I was really sad. It was a really deep sadness. This wasn't my first rodeo, but this was different because I was seeing his personality and his skills just go away. And even when I look back at his first birthday pictures, he didn't even seem like the same baby. He wasn't smiling. He just sat around. He wasn't engaging. He wasn't giving much eye contact. He wasn't really interested in hugs or being carried. He was no longer laughing or smiling as much. He would stare into space even when we would call him. He didn't answer to his name anymore. So now, around this time, another cloud was looming, and that was COVID. So just like my so even though we did not know what was happening, what was going to happen with the world, we started the process a couple months after his first birthday. We didn't wait and see this time. We just went and got his evaluation process started. And anyone who's gone through this knows that it takes some time. I know that New York City moves a lot faster than other places, but we did have to wait a couple months to get people in. And by the time everyone was getting in and getting as many evaluations as we could, the official autism assessment was actually done virtually because by that time the world had been locked down. So yeah, I do want to end this video here because I want to just make sure I stick to what I intended this video to be, which is more about the early signs of autism and how it can look different even amongst siblings that have autism. So thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll be able to bring you some more videos about the early years and how my boys are doing nowadays. Thanks again.